Welcome, welcome, welcome to all who gather with us tonight, and to everyone who is sharing in this night as we remember, reflect, and rejoice in the continued contributions of women to this world. Our country has had a long history of marginalization, including the women we honor tonight during this Women's History Month. In an effort to recognize one of the many ways our nation has caused harm, we'd like to acknowledge and pay respect to the peoples of the Pequannock, Wakanok, Sacox, and Tungus, the traditional custodians of the land where the city of Hartford is situated. Tonight, we gather to celebrate women. And I'm so glad to have our convener with us tonight, who is the spiritual leader of Women's Leadership Institute and of Hartford Seminary itself. She is the sage of this place and the matriarch. I'm excited to welcome who will lead us and convene with us now, M.T. Winter, who will lead us in our program.
Thank you so very much, Brother Ben. Bishop Dr. Benjamin Watts, colleague and soul friend, and I put the emphasis on soul friend. Thank you. Thank you for all of you who are joining us for the first time, and for those of you who are returning for part 2 of our 2-part series. Last month, we focused on Black Lives Matter, which meant the focus was primarily on the United States of America. But this evening, we are talking about women, the Women's International Women's Month, so to speak, where women from all over the world are celebrating with us in some way. 2 years ago, at this time, I was at the United Nations in the midst of thousands, close to 10,000 women, all in traditional garb in Manhattan, in the streets and the buildings and the restaurant, all over, celebrating this month. We had a week-long series of talks, and I was privileged to do a workshop there on a perspective of women and what women are doing and the potential for women to do. And this year, we are here in a different kind of situation. Instead of intermingling on the streets and being able to break bread together physically with one another, we are going to break the bread of the Spirit. We are going to share our souls and our hearts and listen to one another's spirits, so to speak. And Zoom is energy and spirit is energy. So let's consider this as really a way of, that really is going to connect us maybe deeper than we really expect, because we have with us 2 amazing women who happen to be soul friends, colleagues, and have journeyed with me with the Women's Leadership Institute, which is now celebrating this year its 25th anniversary, okay? And there's well over 640 or so graduates of that program, of all races, of all creeds, of all perspectives, of all political understandings, of all sexual reality, sexual identifications. And we are a community, and we are colleagues, and we are friends. And so to begin our conversation this evening on this, I've invited the Reverend Barbara Essex, who has been with me as a pioneer in this pioneering Women's Leadership Institute from the very beginning. And oh my, she has stories she could tell, some of which she probably shouldn't. This white woman, who does she think she is? You know, coming in at that time, because way back then, we forget, those were tough days, you know. And these are tough days, so nothing is new under the sun in some sense. But we had the class size way back at the beginning was over 50 women, and a whole mob of African-American women, and there was some Asian, there were white women, and we're all different from different strata of society, professionals with PhDs. We had women who did, one particular who never even finished high school. And when she graduated, you know, she was so grateful for her graduation. She called a photographer and wore a white, like a wedding gown. She was a grandmother, and all her grandchildren cheered because she got her diploma from Harvard Seminary in the Women's Leadership Institute. And so I am thrilled that to have Barbara with us. And I want to say a few words that of Barbara's words in advance, because these so speak to what you have, who you are, and what you have shared with me and with all of my Women's Leadership Institute colleagues and friends through the years. And I quote you, "Those things that shape us determine how we see ourselves in the world, how we understand our choices, and how we make decisions." Two movements have shaped me. The Black Power movement taught me that I am human, that I should be outraged, that I'm a person of worth and beauty. And Christianity taught me that I am loved, that I have a meaningful contribution to make to the world, and that I am not alone. What I do matters. How I behave and function as a leader is determined in part by who I am. You have influenced and blessed so many women who have taken your words to heart, cherished your message, thrived in your presence, continued connections with you, sometimes personally, but most often in spirit, and remember you to this day. So thank you for returning to the scene, virtually, mind you, and sharing a piece of your wisdom and a chunk of your energy once again with us and our wider audience. Barbara, welcome.
Thank you, Emerita. Thank you. It's a joy to be here. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share with everyone this evening. I want to share some thoughts I have about women and leadership and who we are, as well as some learnings that I've gleaned from participating, even in the small way that I have with the Women's Leadership Institute. So I begin with the theme, A New Day Dawns. Throughout history, women have been working hard to make their voices heard in their families, in their workplaces, in the halls of justice and politics, in their communities, in sports arenas. Women have gone the extra mile to gain equality and to advocate for a better world. Although every day should be Women's Day, Women's History Making Day, we earmark March as the time to shine a spotlight on incredible women who have blazed a trail forward in the past, in the present, and into the future. Tonight, I want us to think together about where we're headed as women and as sisters and brothers to one another. I also want to acknowledge the horrific mass shootings that have happened in our nation, first in Atlanta, where 8 people were killed, mostly women of Asian descent, and just recently in Boulder, Colorado. Our thoughts and prayers are with those families, knowing that what affects any part of the body affects us all. Well, it's been a difficult 5 years, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Uncivil politics, misinformation and lies, divisive public rhetoric and policies, a pandemic that has taken nearly 3 million of our sisters and brothers globally. Increasingly destructive wildfires, floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes, world economies decimated by public health lockdowns, unrest in country after country, food and housing insecurity sweeping across the globe. The list goes on and on. And we know that women bear the greater share of the burden of all that ails us, economically, health-wise, and politically. Perhaps during this year, when our world has been turned upside down, you've had time to think about all the adjustments you've had to make. Working from home, learning new technology, schooling your children, finding alternative childcare, reassessing how you relate to others, how you relate to money, how you relate to problems, how you grieve in a world that's different, to the point where you cannot be with your loved ones as they transition from life to death. Leaving a job, risking your health to serve others. Things are such that it's rumored, I've heard through the grapevine, that people are rethinking those open concept living arrangements, finding that there's nowhere to run and nowhere to hide, no place to think, to breathe, to just be. Yet in the midst of it all, a new day dawns, and there are glimmers of hope everywhere. Women are creating work, starting their own businesses, using their entrepreneurial skills to keep home and hearth together. Women are resisting the rules and regulations that are designed to keep them in small places. Women are breaking through glass ceilings, heading up corporations like UPS, Clorox, and CVS, developing vaccines for the COVID-19, sitting at the table as vice president and cabinet members and heads of federal agencies, leading nations like Tanzania, New Zealand, Taiwan, Norway, and Germany, assembling community responses to injustice and discrimination, heading up mass protests, leading voting rights initiatives in places like Georgia, breaking barriers in sports. And there's always the Lady Huskies dancing again into the Sweet 16 of women's college basketball. Each one of these women has a story to tell, a defining moment to point to, and a passion to pursue. Each one has had her own hill to climb, failures to endure, and insecurities to overcome. Each has learned something about themselves and leaves a legacy for us to inherit and to add to our own. So what kind of energies are needed to keep moving forward despite the difficulties of our time? What does it take to be effective leaders in a world that continues to shift and change beyond our imaginations? I want to throw out just a few things for you to consider. I think it's important to be grounded in a spirituality that gives life and hope. The intangible outside of ourselves that makes us human and connects us with others is important. There is no one way to be spiritual. We must create spaces where we practice our own spirituality and learn from others. I always look forward to my times with Women's Leadership Institute, WLI, when I join the circle. That's when a group of women, a selected group of women, lead the entire body in worship. It's a time to center, shake off our problems and burdens that we carry, to bring ourselves into the moment and be fully present. Women gather on those Friday evenings, knowing they are entering a sacred space where there are no judgments. We are who we are, and it's all good. In addition to being grounded spiritually, it's important to be honest about who we are, what we carry, and what we hope for as we move forward. The WLI Circle is a safe space where women can tell the truth, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and know that they are cherished and loved and valued. Women bring their stories to the circle. They lay their pain before their sisters and know that they are being surrounded with positive thoughts and sometimes solutions and resources. Along with this, we must be willing to hear the truth given in love about our blind spots, shortcomings, and attitudes. Early in our journey with WLI, we had some heated conversations, especially around race. And it got pretty animated, shall we say. But it was always, I think it was always known that underneath the emotions and the tensions, there was a sincere desire to hear one another and to be able to say to one another what the way that you're thinking is not helpful for the common good. And we left those spaces, I think, being better people, is certainly different people, but being clear about what we believe, why we believe it, and seeking the help we need to move beyond those circles that we found ourselves in. I think it's clear, if the pandemic has taught us anything, is that we are connected. We are connected with ourselves, with others, and with the universe. While our societies desecrate land and animal habitats, we are mindful that what we do has an effect on all that surrounds us. No matter who we are or what station we hold in life, when we walk the aisles of our grocery stores, we are grateful that the shelves are filled with what we need: toilet paper, canned goods, frozen goods, water, snacks, from farm to shelves, from factories to trucks. In the midst of a health crisis, we are grateful for orderlies and janitors, nurses and doctors, lab technicians, all who risk their own health and lives to care for us. All those who work long hours, too often at low wages, to ensure that we have what we need. The mantra throughout this crisis has been, we will get through this together. If only all of our brothers and sisters believed and behaved accordingly. Another thing that's helpful in leadership is being mindful that global crises require global collaboration. Our health depends on the health of others. We cannot afford to hoard life-giving resources just for ourselves. That who we have, who we are called, that what we have been called to share and to see that everybody has some, even if it means we must sacrifice. Many of us sacrifice out of our abundance, yet too many refuse to share or behave in ways that honor the humanity of others. Climate change, diseases, and terrorism have been characterized as problems without passports. None of us are immune from the horrors of violence and destruction. Ask those in Atlanta and Boulder. It's just a matter of when it is our turn. We need cooperation and collaboration between and among people and nations. Finally, we have to be committed to that which matters to us. Stacey Abrams in Georgia tells a story about when she graduated from high school. She was the valedictorian of her class, and the governor gathered valedictorians from around the state to come to the governor's mansion for a ceremony and to be honored and recognized. Now, Stacey's parents did not have a car, and so they took the bus to the governor's mansion. And when they got off the bus, they had to walk to the gate where a guard was there to let people in who were supposed to be allowed inside. The guard looked at Stacy and her parents, and he looked at the bus that was pulling away from the bus stop where they had just left. And he said to them, "You don't belong here. This is for invited guests only." Now, Stacy says that her parents, they were in Atlanta because her parents were preparing to be United Methodist ministers. But she says with a little gleam in her eye that her parents had a few choice words for the guard. And after a little bit of back and forth, the guard finally looked at the guest list and realized that they, in fact, did belong there, that they were part of the invited guests, and he let them in. Despite her excitement about going to the governor's mansion and being recognized as the smartest person in her school, Stacy says she didn't remember anything of the ceremony. She didn't remember anything about meeting the governor. All she remembered was the guard standing at the gate telling her that she did not belong. It was a defining moment for her. And she knew that the only reason why that guard said that to her was because they were Black and they were on a bus and not in a car. She said from that moment on, her quest was to broaden the boundaries of where she belonged. Instead of giving up, she pushed on. She says she stays grounded by asking 3 questions before she makes any decision. The first question is, what do I want? She says this keeps her honest about the scope of her ambition. What do I want? The second question, why do I want it? This keeps her focused and gives her strength when things get challenging. It reminds her that whatever it is not something that maybe can be done or might be done. It's always something that must be done. And it fuels her passion and gives her courage when she is fearful. And the third question she asks, how do I get it? This helps her to map out her strategy, determine with whom she should partner and collaborate. And it helps her be accountable to not only those that she enlists to help her, but also to the vision as she has envisioned it. Well, that's not a bad strategy for any of us. What do I want? Why do I want it? And how do I get it? Those 3 questions enabled and empowered her to bring together a group of people, mostly women, to the point where they turned Georgia blue for the first time in, I don't know if it's the first time in history, but it's the first time in a long, long time. And now Georgia has 2 Democratic senators in the Senate. That was Stacy's work. Phenomenal woman. We know, not only from this past year, but from the stories that we've heard over 25 years in WLI, and stories that we've heard at Hartford Seminary from our sisters and brothers from around the globe, that life is filled with challenges, setbacks, and hills to climb. We are called upon always to reset, restart, and refocus. And so we do, as women have always done. We make a way out of no way. We care for one another. We reach back to others who are bringing up the rear. We are not alone. Leadership and true greatness takes passion, commitment, perseverance, and faith. And yeah, a few friends along the way. The new day dawns. We work for a time when all is right with the world, where we don't have Breonna Taylors to march for justice, where we don't have George Floyd's to march for justice, where we don't have women of Asian descent slaughtered for no reason other than they exist. We long for that day when all are free and all is right with the world. But we have to make that happen. We make it happen so that we can thrive and that the universe can thrive and that we can rejoice and see and live the goodness that is ours to share. I want to close with two quotes. The first one is from Georgia O'Keeffe, who is an artist. And she said, "I've been absolutely terrified every moment of my life, and I've never let it keep me from doing a single thing I wanted to do." One of the questions that we asked the women in WLI, what would you do if you were not afraid? I think that's a good question for us to ponder. And I close with the closing lines from the inaugural poem given by Amanda Gorman from the poem entitled "The Hill We Climb."
Mhm.
The closing lines of her poem are, "When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it." Ashe and amen.
Wow. I feel like clanging bells. I feel like sitting in deep silence. I feel like throwing streamers into the air. Thank you so very much, Barbara. Every time I'm with you, I learn something. And not something in the head just, but something deep within my being. I feel like I can become something more, someone more, just a little bit more than I was before our encounter. You are a blessing, and we have been blessed. We will have an opportunity to have some questions after we hear from another speaker, okay? And then we can have a conversation with whomever's out there, should they choose to do so. Cathi Nelson, another soul friend. We go back to sitting in my freezing house because I was always too cheap to put the heat up very high, and I would invite you in after the sessions or something because you had some things you could show me about photography, and you would be freezing, and then I would serve you some peanuts and go, what? It was just unbelievable. How we remained friends even is a miracle. But back in those days, could you ever have imagined where you are now? We are blessed to have here a pioneer in photo management. And you will tell your story. I'm not going to tell it. But all along the journey, how you have emerged and what you have done and what you have done for and with others, not only locally, nationally, but globally, is a story that's just waiting to be told. And so welcome back, even though we hang out in the neighborhood, but welcome back because both of us are so busy we never get together too much anymore, but we will once this virus passes, okay? But thank you for being here with us. Share your wisdom with the wider world and tell us some of your story. And you have a piece of good news that just happened today.
Yeah, it is.
Tell us.
I
Tell us.
just I credit MT and women's leadership with creating help. I mean, I got to think about how to, I was so moved by that whole talk that I'm still, catching up.
Yes, right. Me
But
too.
in the New Yorker, just to give this week, this came out. I couldn't print, I forgot to print, but how a personal photo curator separates the issues selfies from the keepers. Now, that doesn't mean anything to all of you, but when you read this opening, she says elevator operators became a job sometime in the later half of the 18th century, first appearing as its own category on the US Census in 1910. It's the only job since 1950, according to a recent study, that has been fully eliminated by automation. Occupations come and go. The lifespan follows trend in technology. Town criers, soda jerks, lamplighters, clock winders, and ice cutters give way to air traffic controllers, genetic counselors, drone operators, influencers, and social media managers. And the other day, a journalist was scrolling through Instagram and spotted an interesting sounding gig around another user's bio, a personal photo organizer. And then this article goes on. And she even got, who's a good colleague of mine, even got her own illustration in the New Yorker. Now, why that matters is even the word personal photo organizer. So when I came to MT, to women's leadership, kind of at a stage in my life where I wasn't really sure, I had been working with photos. I always have been a deep lover of stories and a deep lover of photos in the way that they are combined, visual storytelling and creating narratives around that process. And I did it with family photo albums, and writing and journaling life experiences alongside the photos was really an important piece to me. And I did that doing something called scrapbooking, and that was a business, but that was changing. As many of you know, when was the last time you went and developed a roll of film at your local photo lab that no longer exists, right? So this all kind of converged. And so I was feeling adrift, like, what is my purpose in life? What do I want to do? Does anybody really care? And MT, in her wonderful wisdom, to me, the words that you said to me is, but we're a people of stories. And those words really resonated with me and reminded me, and MT would constantly reflect back to me, and then the group itself, that these photos that we're taking, that you saw in the beautiful slideshow, right? How did we open this, right? We opened with music and photos that told us stories, and as you're engaging in that, was confirmation to me that maybe this was a good idea, that maybe there was more to this yet than I had figured out. And in the opening of a book I wrote called Photo Organizing Made Easy, which has sold many, many copies around the world, I wrote this quote: after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world, by Philip Pullman. Just the story that you told of Stacey Abrams, I was there with her in that moment when that person said that to her. I mean, I was captured by that. I could visualize it. And so where does that connect with photos, right? So I started creating photo books for people, which is something I did out of my own passion about telling stories, until a friend said, well, what do you charge per hour to make this photo book for me? Or how much would you, and she also needed help getting her photos in those days, not from her phone, because we didn't even take photos with our phones yet, but from her camera. And so I drove to her house, and Maria, and I just talked to her today. Funny, this story, I just always tell Maria, you started a whole industry as well, because she said, you can't come to help me unless you let me pay you. So here's one woman telling another woman. So here I am, the woman, like many women, undervaluing my expertise. I can't charge you. Why would I do that? And her holding me up and saying, no, what you do is of value. I want to compensate you, and me finally giving in. And I got to her house, and not only did she have a computer filled with images that she didn't know what to do with, and that her husband technically owned the Mac. And so, as many women do around technology, she felt like she was not smart and she couldn't figure that out, which is absolutely not true. But women tend to really denigrate themselves around technology. And then she had pulled out boxes of photos she had inherited from her parents and her, because they had just passed away, and she was one of 4 siblings. And she said, I took on the mantle, I'll go through the family photos, which she wasn't getting to. And then her kids were young kids, like high school, and she had all their printed baby photos. And then she just said, Cathi, I don't care how long it takes, but I guarantee you there are hundreds of other Marias just like me out there who would pay somebody to do this as a business. So I drove home, and again, this is where MT confirming for me that we are a people of stories, and this is meaningful work that matters. I decided to call myself a personal photo organizer. So why this was such a big shock for me, and I've been happy all day, is this New Yorker magazine actually says how a personal photo curator, they could have said organizer, separates, but they use personal photo. I spend a tremendous amount of energy and time debating to call myself a professional photo organizer or personal. I chose personal because I feel like what we do is personal work. When you enter into somebody's photo collection, you enter into their lives and you learn, you meet their family members, you see the people who've passed away. It's a very therapeutic process, usually for the person and then also for the photo organizer. So the fact that the New Yorker called that Isabel, who the story is about, joined many years ago to my organization. The fact that she still called herself a personal photo organizer and the New Yorker is now saying this is a real career just blew my mind today. So it's serendipitous in some ways with MT, but so that set me on a journey where I created, as I started my own business, other women mostly would find me and say, can you teach me how to do what you're doing? And so eventually I decided, well, sure, how do I do that? And again, I kept being afraid and showing up because, so here we are, fast forward to today. You know, I have over 750 members throughout the US, Canada, Brazil, the Netherlands, Germany, Australia, South America, I mean, all over the world, who are professional photo, now we call ourselves photo managers, that I've trained and taught. They all have their own business. So what I do is empower we have more and more men, but it's majority women still, empower women that they can have a meaningful career, providing for their families, making a difference in people's lives because they care so deeply for these clients whose photo collections they're being gifted to handle. And then but they're also doing work that means something to them. And it's become a legitimate business. And I've had, and we offer a certification and accreditation. So today I always interview the people when they become a certified photo manager and they have to go through all these different steps, but I like to interview them. And two women recently, one woman was in tears. She was from New York, had been a very top architect. I don't remember her background, and had been laid off and didn't have a purpose in her life, didn't know what her next, and she loves animals and photos, believe it or not. She's starting a business where she's going to make photo albums of families adopting their loved pets, which we know, especially in COVID, we've all been crazy for our pets, right? She has a vision for that, but she had tears in her eyes because she said, what's unique about your organization, Cathi, is I feel so cared for. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that comes from my faith, my spiritual journey, my experience with WLI, that, you know, I always say when you gather the women, save the world kind of feeling, which certainly came out of WLI. But what I've tried to infuse within the photo managers, and I don't know if any are here today, I invited them, I don't know if many did, but they may not know it, but I know it. I always use the saying a rising tide lifts all boats. And that comes out of my deep grounding of my spiritual walk. And I think, and I just know we're making a difference in people's life. But if MT and women's leadership at that moment and those women in that circle didn't reflect back to me that I had an idea that had value, I wouldn't be here today. And all these people's lives that now have been deeply impacted through an entrepreneurial work that they're doing would not have happened. And so I'm internally grateful, and hopefully that's my story. I don't know if you wanted more than that, but that's kind of my
that's wonderful. Can I ask you just to elaborate on one thing that I think is so very important? Two things actually about what you do and what your photo organization has become. Core to it was the word story. Okay, the photos capture the stories. So too many people see the photo as this is a great picture, and they'll tell you what it is, but then there's another picture and they tell you what you do is you weave the story. You teach to weave the story, but not only that the story. And to start with that, there's a second question, but deal with that one because I think that is so important.
Well, you know, I always say the fact that there was the word organization attached to anything in my name makes me laugh. I mean, if I turn my camera here at any label, you would all be like, whoa, I have it perfectly set. Because I'm a visionary, I'm a out of the box kind of thinker. But I knew that to tell us that you needed a narrative, right? Because to tell a story, you need at least a beginning, middle, and end of some level. And so when you're looking at photos and you want to tell a photo story, a family story, they have to have some form of organization. And unfortunately for most of us, they're just a big mess in a box, right? Or there's doubles and blurries. And so that was where the concept of photo organizing came from, was really as a way to help people tell their story. And then when we empower people, because most people are overwhelmed by all of that. And now you have thousands and thousands of images and Google Photos and on your phone. What they're missing now within that, if they don't take the time to tell those stories, is those key moments that you want to capture. And that's what we teach quite a bit. In fact, Isabel, who was featured in this New Yorker magazine, teaches people how to take fewer photos and better photos, mostly of their children, so that you're passing down your family values. Well, we talk a lot about organizing photos by theme as opposed to chronological. I always tell people, break that rule. We live in chronological time order. We remember thematically. What are the themes of your family's life? When did you celebrate? What were your family traditions? Let's find the photos that reflect your family traditions, and then take those photos, curate that collection, scan them, turn them into photo books or wall art, or there's many things you can do with your photos afterwards. Get the stories and pass it down to the next generation. That's the key reason why this career matters. It's not because you want to get your big mess organized. It's really, so hopefully I'm giving that. And that's been the harder message to get across over the years. But I think people get it more and more. And then when we explain it, I think when people get their photo collection back curated with the stories and everything, it's just it's an extremely powerful experience.
Thank you. And that's so key. And I know it means so much, because all of a sudden you're able then, as the person with the photos that have been curated and put into something, you're able to tell that story not only photographically, but every photo has a verbal photo that can be built upon. And you remember things and you fill in the blanks. One thing that you alert people to, and you teach them, and your managers teach the people, is one of the hazards is when we take photos, we never throw anything away. You know, I'm terrible with that. I'll take 3 or 4 or 5 shots, and yeah, and maybe this. And so key to your thing is what to keep. Give the ABCs, I think you call it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really important, because that's a lifesaver. When you start with 100,000 photos, it's a little easier to have only 25,000 and work your way down to 10, you know.
And you know what's amazing, honestly, I'll be candid too here. I work with major, photo companies now. They come to me, Epson, Epson, lots of companies now. And it's so funny because they didn't take me very seriously for a long time, but now they realize they need us, because nobody's using these software programs and things they're creating. Because I tell them, because nobody's sitting home thinking who created the best app today that I can organize my photos with. It's just, we're not, anyway, it's interesting. But the ABCs of photo organizing is the acronym I came up with to really help people get their arms around this, right? So when you're going through your photos, a little tip, any of those of you who are looking at me and thinking, oh, my photos are a mess. If you're looking at your phone or you have boxes of photos, you want to ask yourself, you want to sort your photos this way. Is it the A photo? Is it album worthy? Is it archival worthy? Does it, that's the A photo. You want to hold on to those A photos. The B photos are the photos you can't bring yourself to throw away, kind of like MT. We did this MT actually with her entire photo collection. Where it's hard sometimes, right? Because it's interesting if you really get people to dig down, like, what is the value of a photo? Why do we have trouble throwing photos away? People feel like they're throwing away a memory, something they're going to forget, right? There's a very tangible experience for people when they look at photos of their parents when they were young, themselves, their children, right? So I say, okay, I recognize that. So you can put those in the B pile and those go in the box, but write a note and say to the next generation, whoever opens this box after you've passed away, they have your permission to throw them away. Because we have so many clients who we'll meet with and who are just terrified that they inherited all these photos, they don't know who they are, and they still can't throw them away because they feel like they're throwing away people, right? So if you write that little note, you're kind of helping them out. But the C is, yes, you can throw photos away. So I recommend that you eliminate 80% of your photo collection, which is hard for people to understand. But again, a good story has to have too many words in a book. It's too many words, right? It's the same thing with your photo collection. And the C would be all your blurry doubles. We all got, when we were printing photos, we got doubles and triples. And then also most of your scenery shots, because, the sunset yesterday, It is probably going to it's going to set again tomorrow. And it's a creative outlet when we take photos of sunrises and sunsets. I think we grab our cameras or a snowfall, but really it's okay to delete that because it's going to happen again. And that's not what you're interested in really looking at, unless it was a sunset when you got engaged or something, and that's a different piece. But also the travel scenery shots, like the Grand Canyon. We hope it'll be the same 25, 30 years from now. We're gonna, like, with global warming, who knows, but most likely the Vatican or wherever you've traveled, all those scenery shots are wonderful in the moment. And it is a creative outlet to do that. But those aren't really they're not telling much of a story, because the S is the last most important part of the ABCs, is does it tell a story? And you know what that story is. So maybe it's a picture of your Uncle Bob making the craziest face that I would think, well, this is a can photo, but you would say, no, that's the face that Uncle Bob always made. Or you always went to the Cape for vacation. I'm guessing here in New England, right? And you want to document how the air changes when you cross over the bridge there and you suddenly know you're closer to the ocean or something. That's the story that you want to capture about why as a family maybe you travel to these places and things. And so that's the work that you want to do. And you can even just include a note card. Again, if we're working with printed photos, just take an index card and jot some of that information down and include that in that ABCs. But if you can eliminate 80% of your photos and get yourself down to that 20%, and then the last big one that people learn a lot from and are really surprised. So I say you can be a rule breaker. You don't need to organize your photos chronologically. We live in chronological time order, but we remember and we recall thematically. So what were the themes? If you want to stay chronological, I tell people that's okay. I'm not going to tell you can't, because some people that really throws them. But if you're looking at those photos, what are the themes that arise in those photos? What did you find that you were always taking pictures of? Now, it's not a mystery. We have thousands of members doing this all over the world. And all over the world, it's really not that different what people take photos of, right? They take photos of their children. They take photos of first day of school, weddings, anniversaries, 50th wedding anniversaries. We're the people you love and the people of us, grandparents hugging grandkids. These are the things that we universally, it's universal language, right? Connection. Being connected to the people we love and care most about is the universal language for all of us. And that's where these photos will show up. So those are the photos that you might want to just, if you can make one photo gift or one photo in your life process, what's one theme that you want to remember about your lives? Maybe it's, this is crazy, but I had one client, they loved Halloween. I'm not a big Halloween person, but this woman, they celebrated Halloween every year, the costumes and the stuff on the front yard. And so we created an album of all the years of their Halloween decorations and things, because that was a family value to them. It was something that engaged with fun with their kids. You could see that it was humorous, and the mom and dad probably became big kids themselves in that process. And so that's just a silly example of, it, the theme doesn't have to be really deep. It's about your theme and that you care about. And so that's another tip, I think, in terms of photo managing.
Beautiful. Thank you so very much. So both speakers, at the core of what they're sharing, is at the heart of this is the story. It's the story. Why do Black lives matter? You got to get to the heart of the story of Black lives and what actually happened. And what didn't matter before needs to matter now, so that all of our themes, women rising, becoming, getting more opportunities, they're all stories. And so they're snapshots. Snapshots are moments in time of stories. And I'm so really delighted that the both of you are here tonight. I just feel goosebumps all over, because I think we're onto something so relevant, so necessary, so needed now. And I can anticipate that in local areas, maybe some women want to get together and connect, find out about how they can do this, and maybe get all their photos and have a little photo club for a little bit and put it together. You live in West Hartford. Cathi is still very closely associated with Hartford Seminary, and we'll be doing things together in the coming year. So keep that in mind, okay? So we have time for some questions, and we have persons behind the scenes who are able to make that happen if there are questions to be asked. So let's pause for a moment and see if something happens next. There she comes. Susan.
Oh, I was just going to ask a question myself
Good.
of
Excellent.
Cathi, because I went to a little session that she did about the photo organizing, and it was so helpful, and I got your book and just have really enjoyed. I can't say I've gotten very far, but I have a lot of plans of how to do this. And one of the things I think you said that was so resonant to me was the idea that you're really, it's really a gift to the generations to come to get a handle on those photos, because you are giving them kind of a chore, or this feeling of guilt if they have to throw things away that they're not sure, and they're also looking at things that they have no idea what they're looking at. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about how people respond when, let's say, you're a young adult and your parent goes to that effort to weed out that 80% of pictures that isn't really useful and create something that isn't just on a million different devices and scattered around. So can you just talk about what that means to the next generation?
There's a great study called I forget, it was in the Do You Know survey, but they did a study of self-esteem in children, and they found that a greater indicator of self-esteem in children was not the things that they had, or how good they were in sports or stuff, but was their connection to their family, their connection to the generations before them. And also teaching them lessons about the hard times, that it's not always the easy times, right? So when I talk about passing down these stories and these photo stories, like for instance, when my husband lost his job, now it was a long time ago, but I remember I photographed us burning the want ads, and those want ads. And I journaled about that because my dad had lost his job when I was in high school. It was a very pivotal moment in our life, to this day still impacts me, probably why I work so hard. And nobody talked about it. He went into a deep depression and hid in the basement and for many years. And it really drank heavily. And it was just a terrible time in my family's life. And it was never discussed. And so I knew that maybe photographing that and talking a little bit about our experience was something that my kids that may lose their job someday could look back and see that there's some documentation about that experience, right? So not that that's an extreme example maybe, but I think the other thing is a lot of people worry that this generation isn't interested in all the photos, but they are. They just don't want all of them. I mean, they're definitely a generation that wants to cut back, but a curated photo collection that they can easily access online will make all the difference. And once they start having kids, then that's usually that connection, not always children, but somebody passes away, what's the first thing we do when there's a funeral, right? Is we gather the photos and we put out the slideshow. It's important though to think about doing that prior to that. Like, why wait in that last moment of a flurry of just anxiety and grief? That work can be actually pre-done and prepared for in a way to make a much more meaningful impact if we're willing to talk about it and take the time to do that. So I hope Susan, that give you some.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
If I can just jump in, one of the things that always excites me about this part of this conversation is that young people think different than us, but on some ways they're a little ahead of us. If you look at any of the young people's YouTube pages, or they have Tidal and they have these other Spotify or Pandora, all of them have playlists. So they organize themselves according to genres of music and styles they like. And they're actually looking for that from us. So where's my genealogical playlist? How can I figure out who my grandparents were and what they look like, your parents' parents? And so this organizing principle really does work. And I'm surprised that Kodak and these other companies didn't run to you really sooner, because it may just save the photography business to organize in this fashion. This is powerful. Yeah. When what is often said, when your passion becomes your work, is no longer work.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I know it's
beautiful.
so obvious to me as well, but it's been a journey. I think from these companies' perspective, they're trying to monetize things, right? And this is really a service industry more, and we do give back. We do, there are ways that we do give back to the communities as well. So I want to make that point, and many of our members do as well, because not everybody can afford that, but it is, but that's probably the bigger, their real interest is more about getting you to make more and buy more instead of preserve what you have. And this is really more about a preserve what you have approach. So.
I think it's particularly important now that we spend a little time focusing on exactly what we're saying here, because we're living in a period where things are just so swift and immediate and passing. Every day, something new happens. The video on television and the radio and the movies and the streets and the newspapers, moving on and trying to outdo or outperform or whatever. And it's very difficult. We're losing, there's a danger of losing the backstory, which is what you have saved. And I use that phrase when in my teaching, but what is the backstory to these scriptural accounts? What is the backstory to this particular period of history that we only get the headlines or the synthesized paragraph that summarizes everything? But behind the scenes, all those people whose stories, whose wisdom, whose feelings were left out, So I think that's something deeply embedded in this is something that's very, we need right now more than ever, because things are moving very, very quickly into a whole new way of living life on planet Earth, with the whole connection electronically everywhere. We need to focus on some things that we cannot afford to lose, and we need to name them and we need to claim them.
And I think that's the beauty of WLI, because as I remember it, for some women, it's the first time they've ever told their story uninterrupted. Yeah. And to have a space where you can tell your truth in your way is a real powerful thing for women. And it gives them a sense of self-esteem. It gives them a sense of power, to know that their voice has been heard. And that's the power of that circle. I always tell the women, this circle is the most dangerous thing going, because nobody wants you to be here. Nobody wants you to tell your story. Nobody wants to hear your story. And yet when the stories start unfolding, you see people's whole body language changes, right? Because now they have a sense of themselves that they did not have before. And for me, that's the beauty. And it's probably one of the few places where women are safe to tell their story in their own way.
Thank you. Thank you. Very, very, very important that. And it's important to know, as I say, not only the backstory, but the historical story. Because in our lifetimes, my lifetime, your lifetime, and I have a few more years than anyone on the screen, okay? Don't come back 10 years from now with something for me, because I ain't gonna be here, most likely. But there's more than just the headlines, and there's more than just the major movements. And thematically, there's more. There's something that we cannot afford to lose, these cherished traditions or feelings. And women particularly are gifted with saving those, preserving those, and transmitting them. It's just part of the domestic way of family, culture, larger family, and we cherish things. And it's not a critique, it's just a statement. We cherish things that the fellas don't, and they cherish things that we don't. And so I think it's the both and, both together. So that's why I think you're making me now want to go back to those boxes of photos, which I didn't throw them all away, Kath, I hid them. I'm sorry, but when I saw all those children in Africa, in different places, in the water, in the swamps, in the camps, and even though there were duplicates, I couldn't throw their lives away. But I'm going to leave a note. You have permission for me because these are duplicates. But the stories behind them, there's a similarity to the stories we're telling now because we are still families and cherish our families and growing families and interconnecting with other families. So maybe we can use photo sharing even along with photo management, photo sharing as a kind of maybe methodological way of connecting with one another to increase the diversity within the groups we form that are our close friendships. You know, we need to take more time than just tea and cookies in our diversity gatherings, but let's listen to the backstories of the people who gather. So that's a step on the road to not only full inclusion, but that we recognize we are one, all one human family, all one human family.
MT, one thing I always remember the first meeting in WLI that just when we, that first Friday going really nervous, didn't know anybody, was my, you know, I joined and I, and you had us sit and you had us go in the circle and introduce ourselves through our female lineage. I mean, nobody had ever asked me that question before. I never thought like I'm the daughter, I'm Cathi, the daughter of Miriam, the daughter of Ruth, and that's as far back as I can still go. I could probably dig that out, but just that alone, that connecting, and then hearing all those women in the circle say that just was that immediate sense of unity and connection, that we are all the daughter of somebody who is the daughter of somebody, who is the daughter of somebody. And in that circle, the amazing thing, you know, free slaves, and it was just, you know, this full diversity of people and experiences that joined at that moment. And I think that's something we want to continue to find a way to make sure that we connect that human story that we're all part of.
Thank you so much for bringing that up, because part of that ritual was we passed a candle, we lit the light, and we said, I am the daughter of, the granddaughter of, the great-granddaughter of. But what was so astonishing, year after year after year, in all those years, women of color, women, African-American women, Hispanic women, they could go much further back. They knew they would go daughter of, granddaughter, great-granddaughter, and then they didn't know what the thing was, but her sister and her mother. And it was amazing, that sense of culture and collective and family. So that's a lovely way to resurrect something like that, to keep the memories alive, but also the spirits, because those spirits are hovering still within and all around us, who are helping us in this generation to kind of enculturate and help the next.
MT, I don't know if you want to get a couple of these questions in.
I do. I don't know where they are.
Okay, they're in. There's a little Q&A box up there. Let me just throw a couple of them out.
Would you do that? You take care of organizing for me, okay? I'm metaphorical. You're the organizing. You're the bishop. Go
I'm with you.
All right.
Anything. The first question is probably to Barbara. Barbara, the question is, how can white women uplift and empower Black women in that they work with, and how can they help? How can they help?
Well, one of the things you can do is have a conversation with those women and ask them. And you know, one of the things that happens is, I think sometimes people, especially white women, don't want to be accused of being racist. And so they don't want to say the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you have to take a risk to say the wrong thing that will put you on the right path. And you gotta have a lot of courage to do that. But I encourage you to do that. Just talk to the women. Just, you know, say, I want to be an ally. What do you want me to do? Don't expect them to educate you, some of that work you'll have to do on your own, but at least begin the conversation. And don't be afraid of the outcome. Don't be afraid of being rejected. Go to the next person. Because not everybody's in that space where they want to be the one who helps you. But don't be afraid to do that, and just, have the courage to put yourself out there in that way. Another thing you can do is to support Black organizations. Don't pay a lot of attention to what the media says about Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement and so forth. Do your own research, but find a way that you can share whatever resources you have with that. Last year was a horrible year because I wanted to be out there marching. I thought when I retired, I was going to have time to read all these books that are on my shelf. But the political scene was just so horrible that I wanted to be out there. But I was also mindful that I'm part of that group that is really susceptible to COVID-19 symptoms and so forth. And so I didn't feel safe to be out there marching. So what I did was I looked at my budget and I said, I have this amount of money that I can donate. And I started donating to organizations, and I did a monthly thing where every month these organizations got some money, because I know that it takes boots on the ground. And if I'm not going to be one of those boots, then I need to support somebody who is. And so that's another way that you can be helpful and be an ally.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you.
Meg asked a question, of course, offering a number of wonderful kudos to UMT and to Barbara and Cathi. But she talks about how she's filled with great appreciation, a sense of pride on what you, our two speakers, have accomplished in your work and how many lives that you have touched and you continue to touch. The question is, can both of you share with us an especially meaningful experience you had in your work? A meaningful experience. Both you, Cathi and Barbara, if you don't mind, a meaningful experience.
Cathi,
Either one.
First.
I've had many meaningful experiences. I'm trying to think of one that would, do you have one that jumps to mind, Barbara? I'll let you go first, or I'll, I guess I could say this for me, in knowing that I'm making a difference in like one of a member from Brazil, a Portuguese from Brazil. And so here's like this, they find me on through, the internet's an amazing thing. I mean, I'm not some brilliant marketer. I'm just now big enough to finally hire a marketing person I'm interviewing, but up till now it's been very grassroots and people just find us. And so, but speaking with her and realizing that, she wanted to impact her community, and she offered to translate our site into Portuguese so that more people could understand some of the work that she was doing. And then she also, eventually I realized the exchange rate was so high that it's very expensive to be a member, the US dollars compared to the Brazilian one. And it was really important to my value system to be able to give them a significant discount. It was immediately able to make a decision as the CEO of a very small company to do the right thing, to empower women. I didn't want finances to stand in the way of the work that they do, because I know that I'm impacting her life and then she's impacting other people's lives. And at the end of the day, that's what I care most about. So I don't know if that's just, it means a lot to me when I get to do that. It makes me feel like I'm a woman showing up, I'm trying to walk the walk. Because it's one thing to go through WLI and to experience all these feelings, but many times you have to really make some decisions at some points. Am I actually living out what the words I'm saying? And so that's what I'm trying to do. And that's meaningful to me when I can feel to myself, okay, Cathi, you're honoring the women that have gone before you and paved the way to teach you things. So that's helpful.
Thank you.
MT always laughs at me when I talk about this, but my upbringing, I grew up in a bubble on the south side of Chicago. and all of my teachers were Black. Our doctor and dentist were Black. And so I became what I call a hardcore Black power girl. See, she's laughing at me. And my first career was teaching. I taught high school in Chicago public school system. And my first teaching assignment was in the neighborhood where I grew up. In fact, they tore down 2 of my childhood homes to build this high school. And I literally went back to my community to teach. And I was very proud and very happy to be there. But in the 70s, the Chicago public school system decided that they would integrate. And they were not able to integrate the students, so they integrated the teachers. And so I got transferred from my all Black high school that was 8 minutes from my home to a high school that was on the other side of town. It took me about an hour and 20 minutes to get there. The way that I phrase it is I passed every high school in Chicago to get to this school. And that school was primarily Polish. There was a really small Black student population, a really small Latino student population. So most of my students were white. And I went to that school determined that I was not going to like it. You know, I did not want to teach white kids. I wanted to empower Black children. I wanted them to know that they were somebody. And, you know, I felt like my skills were just going to be wasted on these white kids. And what I learned early on, because I treat the young people like they're young people, like they're human beings. And they responded to that. This girl, Polish girl, invited me to her home. Her family was having a cookout on a Saturday, and she invited me to her home to meet her family. My first instinct was to say, oh no, not only am I not going to do that, that's on a Saturday. I don't get paid to work on Saturday. But it was the way that she invited me and the way that she talked about how her family wanted to meet me, because she talked about me all the time. Mm-hmm. And I said to her, okay, I will come. In the back of my mind, I was thinking, go, put up with it, and then you'll be done. But her family greeted me so warmly. They were so, they were just warm, and they were friendly, and they were so appreciative of what I was doing with their daughter in terms of opening her up to English and literature and so forth, that I fell in love with them. And I fell in love with all of my students. And it was the beginning of a transformation for me, where at one point I was pro-Black and anti-white, and I became pro-Black and open to everybody. And that was the beginning of a journey for me. And I was at that school for almost 4 years. And every year I just fell in love with a whole new group of students. And I started going to the dances, and I started chaperoning the buses to the games. And, you know, when they graduated, they invited me to their weddings and their baby showers and things like that. So I found another community that I had not even banked on. And so it really was a time that moved me off of my needle so that I could embrace everybody. And it was good. It was good. But I was reluctant at first, but they just, you know, they just chipped away. Will you come watch me wrestle? You know, will you come to my play? I'm in the play. And, you know, after a while, you just give in and you fall in love, and it's all good.
That sure sounds like a wonderful closing statement, doesn't it? We've come like to the end of our time, but the Holy Spirit gave the words, the absolute perfect words, to kind of conclude what I feel has been an absolutely lovely and meaningful and sincere and transformative sharing. I just want to hug the screen with all of you, and I will. and look forward to the time when we can intermingle again. But thank you so very much. And to all of you out there, wherever you are, whoever you are, thank you for being with us. Hang in there just a little bit longer. And pretty soon we'll have opportunities to commingle again. And maybe I'll be seeing some of you in the Women's Leadership Institute in the future. Who knows? I hope so. Anyway, may we just send us off with a blessing. May the spirit of the living divine, living spirit, living energy that permeates our universe, that permeates out into deep, deep space and beyond anything we could ever imagine, that fills planet Earth, that satiates all living things on the planet, that links us to one another, that creates us as one family, one people, one group of individuals who have so much potential and a capacity to do so much more for one another and for our planet. May it be so. May all of you be blessed, and may the Spirit fill us to the brim with love and compassion and mercy and peace. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.